Hello, this is Azrael, and in this video we're going to be talking about the Esbats and the Sabbats. I'm going to start off with the Esbats because they're easier to explain. An Esbat is basically a meeting of a coven or group of witches, and traditionally it's centered on those meetings around the phases of the moon. Usually the full moon, and anything can be done during these Esbats. Most common that I've came across are people who do initiations or do prosperity or healing magics for their community or their members of their coven. You don't necessarily have to have a full moon to have an Esbat, but you can have it any day of the week or as many times as you want. But it's usually associated with the phases of the moon, and is not locked to just having an Esbat on a full moon. And speaking of full moons and phases of the moon, it is customary that solitary practitioners as well as coven practitioners do a little ritual to bring down the power and the influence of the moon around the full moon. But yeah, let's move on to the Sabbats, which are a little bit more complex. There are 8 of them. They are the quarters and cross quarters of the year. The year is split into 2 parts, the lighter and then the darker. Okay, the first Sabbat is Samhain, often mispronounced as Samhain. Christians tend to know this as Halloween. Now, Samhain means end of summer or summer's end, and this is the third and final harvest. This ends the old year and starts the new year, and the dark half of the year begins as the wheel starts turning to Yule. But before we talk about that, a little quick rundown of this. Samhain is generally celebrated on October 31st. On this night, depending on your affiliation with what coven or belief system, either the goddess goes into the underworld or the god goes into the underworld. The coven that taught me said that his horns tear the veil, and as they go into the underworld, this makes the veil between this world and the next thinner. And so on this night, things such as divination, talking to the dead, are easier to accomplish during this time of the year, according to the belief system. And some traditions say that the god dies and gets reborn later through the year. But this is the time of year to get to know the darker aspects. The goddess in this aspect is in the crone stage. Now we move to Yule, which is usually on December 20th to December 23rd, depending on the Gregorian calendar. This is the winter solstice. This is when the dark half of the year starts giving way to the lighter half of the year. The days start slowly getting longer. Since this is the return of the sun, basically, it is usually seen that the god is being reborn during this time of the year. Sometimes the god aspect is referred to as the Oak King during this time of year. Some of the practices are bonfires, symbolizing the return of the sun, and of course a lot of Christmas traditions were borrowed with their symbolism being changed. So Christmas, if you want to know how to celebrate Yule, it's pretty much Christmas without Christ. You have the green trees, evergreens, which represent eternal life, and so forth. Even the Yule log, which bears the name of the pagan holiday, that even though it's used during Christmas. Okay, now we turn to Imbolc, which is usually around February 1st. Imbolc, if I remember correctly, means in the belly. And this is referring to the seeds starting to awaken because spring is coming. Spring's here, basically. The goddess is in her maiden aspect, also the bride aspect. The god aspect is now in basically he's gone through puberty. They're about to be reunited. This holiday focuses on growth and renewal. Some little practices around this time of year. You have in the ancient times you had corn dolls or wheat dolls. Little dolls were made and often given little wands with acorns on top. And in the morning, the ashes from the hearth were examined to see if the little magic wands left marks, as they would be good omens. Little crosses are given on this day, fashioned from wheat stalks, a symbol of protection. Some other names for this holiday is Saint Bridget's Day or Candlemas. And the maiden aspect of the goddess will remain a maiden. I think it's up until the March 21st. And okay, that leads us to Ostara, around March 21st. This is spring, or the vernal equinox. In many magic traditions, the young god becomes married to the maiden at this point. The main focus is fertility and new growth. In the Christian tradition, this would be called Easter. And this will lead us to April 30th or May 1st, also known as May Day or Beltane. The running theme here is, you guessed it, fertility and abundance. During this holiday, the goddess becomes pregnant. One of the surviving traditions around this time that are even practiced by a lot of Christians is the Maypole, which, yeah, Christians out there, if you're listening, all this time that you've been letting your child dance around the Maypole, you've been having them dance around a giant penis. Yeah, it's a fertility rite. Also, some of the popular foods that are around here during this time is grains, cereals, oatmeal. As the god and goddess fall in love even further, the flowers bloom, and a good practice for people during this time is to take a walk on a nature trail and to do nothing more than just take in the beauty, meditate on the abundance of nature, and what have you. And then the wheel of the year turns more, and now we have June 21st, which is the summer solstice, also called Litha. I've also heard it pronounced Lita. This is when the sun god has reached his greatest strength. He's known as the Green Man at this point, or Jack of the Green. He's the Lord of the Forest. And ironically, a lot of his artistic renditions are found on church architecture, as he's peering through countless leaves, or has a face made of leaves. This is also a good time for fairy communication if you practice fairy magic. The wheel turns a little bit more. Now we're on July 31st or August 1st. And this day is called Lammas, also pronounced Lunazad. This represents the first harvest of the year. The plants from spring drop their seeds for future crops. During this time, the god loses some of his strength symbolically as the sun gives way to the darker half of the year as it's starting to go into autumn. He's become a little bit of an older man, but he's not yet dead. Now keep in mind that when I say harvest, from the days of old, when everybody was a farmer and their life depended on it, everybody had to harvest, and they harvested around this time. But keep in mind, we're also talking about harvesting oneself. Honor the fruits of your labor through the year. Prepare and plant the possibilities for the next coming year, both with job opportunities and other aspects, relationship otherwise. Plan, this is also symbolic for planning to have children. And now we go to Mayboon. It's also pronounced Maybone or Maboon. This is the Autumn Equinox, and it is the second harvest, and it usually falls around September 21st. During this time, the god and goddess have aged even further. The goddess is in her mother to crone aspect, and her consort is starting to prepare his inevitable death and rebirth. And that completes the 8 Sabbats. Now, by no means is this video series from start to finish meant to be a complete study. What I have given you here, what my intention was to give you a working knowledge. So when you go to the bookstore and pick up a book, you'll have some working knowledge on what it is. And if you're going to use the internet, you'll have some working knowledges about what you need to search for. As I have not given you any specific rituals or anything, any kind of magic traditions based with Wicca, I'm just giving you the meat of the religion. It's important that you find this out for yourself. Even if you want, so you'll know if you want to practice magic or not. My next video series I'm going to be touching up on will be magic, but I will not be giving it solely from a Wiccan perspective. As I said from the very beginning, witchcraft is not Wicca. Wicca is not witchcraft, though most Wiccans are or do practice witchcraft. Their version of Wicca, their version of witchcraft melds magic and their religious practice together. So a lot of their magic that they practice, like for example, if you're wanting to find a beautiful man or woman, you would probably use spells to attract a mate during the time the god and goddess are mating or getting married during their year. Just to give an example, some of the traditional witchcraft practitioners, like I said, don't adhere to the Wiccan Rede, and so some of the magic traditions, most of the magic traditions I'm going to be speaking of, is not going to be centering on Wiccan beliefs mixed in. So that's up to you to marriage the two practices if you're going to do that. So thank you for listening, and do me a solid and like and subscribe. Take care.